Well, hello, it's Jimmy from Stuart Arts. I'm into doing some small turnings on the wood lathe. I've been using this little piece of 1024 screw as an arbor, and it just has a hex nut turned up against the work here, and then I just machined a little conical indent here to receive a Jacob's chuck. And so this has worked well for me, but it has a couple of shortcomings to it, and I wanted to make a tool that was a little more permanent. Two complaints I have about it is, well, two or three. When you squeeze the threads up into the Jacob's chuck, it has a tendency to booger the threads up, so when you're trying to remove this little nut here, you end up fighting it to get it off. You end up essentially recutting the threads. And then this piece, you know, the screwdriver blade doesn't want to stay in there, so you end up fumbling around with it a good deal. So I wanted to be able to make some larger parts, and I wanted to improve this design so that I can mass produce these little chain pulls. So this is what I've come up with here. This is the piece that will be mounted to the live center. It'll just have a little indent here, a blind hole. It'll be cut out of a piece of hex stock. I've got some steel and brass on hand. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this down to a cylindrical shape, and that way when you're using your lathe tool right up to the work here, it doesn't get into this this hex piece. So I'll cut that back, and then I'll have another piece on the other side that's like this, but it'll be through drilled. And the idea here is that you can get a wrench on these two if you want to tighten these down very snugly. And finally, we'll have this little end cap here, and that'll just have a blind hole drilled into it and tapped. And the idea is that this will be fed into the Jacob's chuck here, and when you tighten that down on this, it won't booger up the threads. I manufactured the little parts on my Harbor Freight mini lathe. This is a great little hobby lathe and perfect for this kind of application. Here I'm just facing off a piece of hex stock and just putting a chamfer there. Always do a little file, center drilling to accept a drill bit, and then this is drilling out aluminum here to be tapped, and just tapping with the 1024 bit here and just facing. Here's an unnecessary step. Brass can just be so pretty though. I have to have my stuff polished up to make it look nice. Beautiful. Okay, so I manufactured a total of, let's see, 3 times 4 is 12 little parts. This took me about 2.5 to 3 hours on the mini lathe here. So I've got my little end caps here. I've got the parts here that interface with the live center. And then I've got, I'll call them lock nuts here. And so let's go ahead and put one together. So here's a blank. I've got a hole that's cut a few thousandths over, this is a 1024 here, a few thousandths over that, and so we'll just put the thread the lock nut on there, and I should be able to turn these nice and tight, and we'll just add an end cap here. This is the little aluminum end cap, and this will be chucked up in the Jacob's chuck. Got the work mounted in the arbor here, and we've got the Jacob's chuck on the spindle. It's been opened up, and we'll just turn that down here, tighten it up, and then we'll bring the tailstock into our little recess point. Up, it just went loose right away. Yeah, I got that tool right into it and it loosened right up, so I think I may need to add a lock nut to that so that it won't do that. Alright, so now I've added a lock nut and a lock washer. A lock washer on this, and hopefully I can finish this job now without it spinning. But I guess that's debugging a new design, right? Well, there's my first completed piece on this. I'll probably make this a tool handle, maybe for an awl or a small screwdriver. The combination of the lock washer and the lock nut on there cinched it down to the degree necessary to keep it from spinning, and as soon as I did that, I was able to turn this whole thing with no problem. One minor annoyance with the design is that this hex end here that goes onto the live center, when I was tightening and loosening, this thing would tend to come loose, and I prefer for this to be tight. So I'm going to go ahead and solder this on here. I've got some flux in there, and we'll go ahead and heat her up and put a little solder so that this is fixed to the piece of all thread. Yeah, and I'll put this back on the lathe and just trim that down so that it's a nice surface here. Alright, so where did we end up? Well, this is the old design here. Very simple, but did not leave you a lot of room to work, and you really couldn't get the tool rest where you needed it. So I made these little guys. They look like shish kebab skewers kind of, and the idea is to get the work more out in space so that you can work around it a little better. So I went after that design that I showed you up front. I did make a few changes along the way. First of all, I had to add a lock nut and washer to keep this thing from spinning, because this thing is turning towards you and it's trying to loosen this nut. So this needed to be locked. So once I put that on there, that really kind of solved that problem. Another thing I ended up doing is for this hex end cap here, I was kind of got annoyed with that getting loose, and I think it maybe helped this to loosen up as well. So I went ahead and I soldered these to the all thread. So those are staked in place now. The end cap is something I'll probably go to brass on. The aluminum, when you put it into the Jacob's chuck and you turn the piece, will spin onto the all thread, and it's kind of tough to get that off of there sometimes. So I'm not sure what the right answer to that is. But I probably will do something a little bit different. But having said that, I've done a couple turnings with this design, and I'm happy with the additional space that I have. A friend suggested going with the Drawbar Design, and so I've got to think through that. I've heard a couple turners talk about that on YouTube also, but I haven't seen one demonstrated. So I'll have to go home and scratch my head on that and see if I can come up with a drawbar arrangement that's got a quick release so that I can go through this. So I've got 4 of these now, and I can put my blanks on 4, turn 4, and then finish 4, and then turn it over. That way I don't have to go through step by step with each and every one of these. So accomplished my immediate goal. I look forward to using these, and I'll probably turn the wheel on the design and make further improvements. This is where we're going to leave it for this video. I appreciate you watching, and love those comments. If you have any suggestions or comments, I sure hope you take the time to leave those with me. And if you're not a subscriber, I sure hope you'll consider becoming a subscriber.